Welcome to the lABLEd podcast, a show about disability, illness and difference.
And history.
I'm Lucy.
And I'm Alice.
I'm Daisy.
So much more than what you see. We all live our lives differently. Kaleidoscope identity. And this is who I'm meant to be. I'm just labelled me. I'm just labelled me.
In this episode, along with Lucy crying and Alice swearing, there's going to be a number of historical terms for disability that are now considered extremely offensive.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the lABLEd podcast. It's another history lesson today, which is always very exciting, at least for me and Lucy. I'm not sure Daisy's very keen on being up this early.
I don't think any of us are this keen on being up this early. We've all regretted this instantly.
It's very, very early.
Yeah.
It's not very, very early. It's like Daisy's going on like it's 6:30 in the morning. It's not.
It might as well be.
If it was 6:30 in the morning, I would not be functioning.
It's 9:15, everyone.
Yeah,
we all need to suck it up a little bit.
We're being a bit dramatic.
What a surprise.
Yeah, what a surprise.
So this week, Lucy's doing a disabled person, talking about a disabled person from history. I know that she's been quite excited about this one. She's roped alongside roping Daisy into it, she's roped her local museum into helping her. So
I've been a little bit of a swat is what I've been, and a bit of a teacher's pet. When I was doing my research, so today we're going to be talking about Dr. Samuel Johnson, whose Birthplace Museum. He was born in Lichfield, which is about 15 minutes up the road from me. So he's got a Birthplace Museum in the middle of the city, and I can't get into the museum because it's very inaccessible. So I emailed them and said, basically, we're doing this podcast, and could you give me some more information because I'm going around in circles? And they gave me a load of stuff, which I could not make head nor tail of. And I said, I thought to myself, I can't make head nor tail of this. So I gave it to Daisy. Team effort with this, really.
Yeah, I'd love me a document, so.
Yes.
What's the crack with the museum? Is it like, did it used to be his house? Why is it an inaccessible building?
Yeah, it's where he was born, and I think it's where he spent most of his life, and it's very, very tiny. They've got like a Google Maps type situation where you can sort of click through.
Oh, right.
And when you look inside, you're like, yeah, I'm not surprised you can't get in there, really, to be fair. So I'm not blaming them at all, but they are looking apparently at making the museum a little bit more accessible, which I seem to have inadvertently got myself involved with. So, you know.
Listen to you going on it like this is something that you hate. I know that you are 100% like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Considering like this is
cool.
Considering that this is my day job as well. This sort of access stuff is my day job. So I've gladly said, like, if you would like me to help, then of course I will. So yeah, but
translated to yes, please include me. I really want to do it.
Can you please call the new wing of the museum the Lucy Wood wing? But yeah, so it's quite exciting, really. We've got quite a lot of additional information to add on to my A4 sheet of notes, which is exciting. So, are we all ready?
I'm strapped in.
Okay,
yeah.
So Samuel Johnson was an English writer and critic, and one of the most famous literal figures of the 18th century. I can't speak.
Literary?
That's the one. Oh, it's too early. He is best known for the Dictionary of the English Language. You may have also seen him portrayed in Blackadder by Robbie Coltrane. I think it's Robbie Coltrane in Blackadder.
I thought it was Stephen Fry.
Oh, it could be. I don't know. Well, he's portrayed in Blackadder anyway, which is note to how famous he is, really. Samuel Johnson was born in Lichfield, Staffordshire on September the 18th, 1709. Samuel Johnson was born to a Lichfield bookseller. He was a sickly baby and contracted scrofula, which left
Scrofula.
him...
Yeah, scrofula.
Scrofula, which left him with physical scars. Being touched by Queen Anne, the famous mythical cure of the King's touch did not help him, because, spoiler alert, of course it didn't.
Funnily enough, the royal family don't actually have magic powers.
If they did, I would be licking Queen Elizabeth II.
So how is this sentence going to end?
So yeah, Daisy, have you got a bit about the Queen Anne King's touch thing?
Well, yeah, because there's some kind of, some people seem to, well, some reports that he had the scrofula from that young. It seems that might be because he definitely had it later, because apparently if you get scrofula when you're that young of a baby, you don't tend to survive it, and you don't tend to get eye complications. So there was one of the documents that seems to be implying that, you know, he may well have just had sort of other, you know, eye problems based on his, you know, traumatic birth, but then he got scrofula definitely when he was like 2.
Oh God.
You know, I was literally just thinking, does anybody else think scrofula sounds like a dog's disease?
Yeah.
And then Bertie's like, yes, it does.
My mum is retrieving the dog.
Damn it, Bertie.
Bertie, you're ruining it for yourself. Right, sorry, Daisy. Where should we go from before we started barking?
Well, I was just going to say we'll have to leave all of this in and then include some cute pictures of Bertie and all the
we can
Instagram
do that,
stuff.
Yeah, we'll do that, okay.
Yes,
all
starring Bertie the dog. Do we know what scrofula is?
Yeah, so scrofula is like tuberculosis, but specifically when it gets into the lymph nodes in the neck.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of these names that they get, you know, they've got about 16 different names for the same disease because, well, they didn't necessarily know the difference.
Yeah. So you were saying that they think he had scrofula as a baby because he definitely had scrofula when he was older?
Yeah. So he seems to have got sort of developed scrofula when he was like 2.
Okay.
But he definitely did have, you know, eye problems and things like that when he was a baby. Well, apparently you know, medically how scrofula works, it was probably unlikely to be that as a baby.
So sorry, Daisy, just to recap, because the dog was barking and I was distracted. If you get scrofula, I know you're not a doctor, but if you get scrofula, have you got scrofula for life, or does it clear up and go away?
I suppose if it's TB, you kind of just stuck with, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a bit like malaria, isn't it?
It seems from what I've read, particularly scrofula, because it's kind of inflammation of the lymph nodes and things. It's something that can go up and down.
Yeah,
which is kind of why they thought that, you know, the King's touch worked.
Yeah,
because you know, they would happen. You know, the King or the Queen would touch you, and then it would sort of go down, and then obviously, you know, they have no way of telling whether it's gone completely or not. But it's sort of, you know, almost the swelling would go down, it go into, you know, remission almost. And then sort of, you know, to come back later.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons I think where they started giving out the little coin things and like the things that you could put around your neck. And for one of the monarchs, it was like a hanky. But I prefer the, you know, coin around the neck. I think that's a nicer memento than a used handkerchief.
Yes, it really is, isn't it? Well, there are reports that Samuel Johnson was so proud of the fact that he had been touched by Queen Anne, even though it didn't work, that he would often wear the medal around his neck. So it's a bit like a talking point. The way I think of it is, it's like me wearing my BBC pass that is now expired round my neck still as a talking point. What's that around your neck? It's my BBC pass. Do you work at the BBC? No, I used to though, because, you know, why not? What was the picture of the medal? Because I couldn't make head and tail of the medal. They sent a link to the picture of the medal, and I was like, oh, this is This is the medal. Was that the medal that Queen Anne gave him?
Coin on a chain.
Yeah, it looks like it. So I think that is the coin. So originally, when they were doing the King's Touch, they would actually, physically touch people. And then they started sort of, touching like the hankies and the coins and giving that to people. Partly so it's. I guess it was probably partly so they didn't have to touch as many ill people, but also because it was like, oh, it'll work better if you keep it on you for longer.
Well, yeah, I suppose. Because you can't really walk around with Queen Anne touching your face all the time, can you? Like, yeah.
It would be difficult. I feel like she wouldn't have approved of that.
No.
I imagine she's got other things to be getting on with as well.
Yeah. Queen Anne is another person I would like to do as a history lesson at some point. Because, again, she's fascinating.
Was she disabled?
She was.
I did not know that.
Have you seen The Favourite?
No.
She was disabled, wasn't she, Daisy? Before I go and waffle on a bit.
Yeah, from The Favourite, yeah, she was.
Yeah. Samuel Johnson was the last person, or within the last cohort of people, to be touched, to have this thing called the King's Touch, because after that, they sort of moved away, didn't they, Daisy, from...
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine it's a pretty good way to pass on communicable diseases to your monarch. So can't see it being the wisest of decisions, really.
But they did it for a really long time. It was only sort of George I who kind of moved away from it. But they specifically did these things. Most of the time, they did it in the winter when you were less likely to be able to pass on those diseases. So it's like between September and Easter. I think because, obviously it was all, religion-y. It was between Michaelmas and Easter.
Okay.
Right, okay.
Which I think,
and that's why the Queen, I think, wears gloves now when she
probably
shakes her.
In case any of us touch her.
Gloves on her hands.
In case Lucy tries to lick her.
She needs a hazmat suit, really. If she's meeting me, she needs to wear a hazmat suit.
I was going to say, she was rocking PPE before it was cool.
Yeah. Get away from me, you peasant. Samuel Johnson was also blind in one eye and had poor hearing, perhaps as a result of contracting tuberculosis from his nursemaid. But his prominent disability, which became more obvious as he grew up, and ruined his attempt at earning living as a school teacher when he was posthumously diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. Johnson was famous for his tics and gesticulations. It's too early. William Hogarth described him as him shaking his head and rolling himself about in a strange and ridiculous manner, and it concludes that he was an idiot. Johnson was also reported as making odd clucking and whistling sounds and exhibiting obsessive compulsive behaviour.
So they thought while he was alive, like, even though this is like the dictionary guy, they thought because of his tics and his verbal and physical tics and stuff that he was that he lacked intelligence.
Yes.
But the dictionary.
I mean, the term idiot is kind of
I think it was talked about before.
It's sort of often it is some kind of neurological or learning disability or difference or something like that. But it was always also just used for that,
like a catch-all term, isn't it? Yeah. All-encompassing umbrella of they're a bit weird.
Yeah. It's kind of it implies a sort of mental impairment or a learning disability, but it's not necessarily saying that he was unable to do things like that.
He was educated at the Lichfield Grammar School and unable to find teaching work, drifted into a writing career. In 1737, Johnson moved to London and spent a brief time at Oxford University, where he struggled to support himself through journalism, writing on a huge variety of subjects, an edition of Shakespeare, critical essays on poets, together with religious and political writings.
I think it says a lot about the changes in our society, that because he couldn't get a teaching job, he went on to be a writer.
Yeah, I know.
I think if you these days is, you know, there are thousands of teachers who are like, oh, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to go to uni and do an English degree, and it's like, oh, I'm a teacher now.
I read this and I was like, oh, so basically Samuel Johnson was what the equivalent of those, you know, those people you see in Starbucks that sit there with their laptop and they're writing their screenplay, like with a coffee in the corner, like where they've set themselves up for the day. And you're like, can you move, please? You've been here 4 hours. So Johnson was a Tory, but also a committed Anglican who believed in a notably Christian way. For example, he was very hospitable to his friends, several of whom lived with him, and his eccentric household. He was an opponent of slavery and expressed some progressive views about women's equality. He was not, although not consistently. In his magazine, The Rambler, which basically would be called, that's what I would call my magazine if I had a magazine, and in his comments such as, a decent provision for the poor is the true test of civilization.
Socialism!
Yeah. Johnson demonstrated a social conscience which coexisted with his support for the social hierarchy. He was eventually asked to leave Oxford University because of lack of funds. He gradually, however, acquired a literary reputation, and in 1747, a syndicate of printers commissioned him to compile his Dictionary of the English Language, a task that took 8 years, and Johnson employed 6 assistants, all of them working in his house off Fleet Street. So that is quite good going, isn't it, really, I think? Samuel Johnson was one of history's great tea drinkers, consuming dozens of cups of tea each day, reviewing a critical book of tea. Johnson described himself as a hardened and shameless tea drinker who has for 20 years diluted his meals only with an infusion of this fascinating plant, whose kettle is has scarcely time to cool. So he liked tea, basically.
I mean, you know, I get it. I like tea.
So before I did this research, I didn't realise that he was disabled or an avid tea drinker. I mean, I drink a lot of tea, but like, it sounds like he was like constantly like, put kettle on, will you? Johnson was particularly fond of cats.
Yeah, I'm liking this guy increasingly. He sounds like he likes words, he likes cats, he likes tea, and he's a bit lefty.
Yeah. Should we invite him to co-host the lABLEd podcast? He was also particularly fond of cats, such as the famous Hodge, his cat, which was memorialised with him in his statue in London.
Oh.
Hodge.
Hodge is a cute cat name as well.
Quite nice, isn't it, that? In 1735, he married Elizabeth Porter, a widow of more than 20 years his senior, also known as Tetty. She was more than 20 years
older. Well done, Elizabeth.
Yeah, she was more than 20 years older than him, but they had a tender relationship until she died in 1752. Shortly afterwards, Francis Barber, a former slave from Jamaica, joined the Johnson household as a servant with Johnson for more than 30 years, as did his wife and children, and he became Johnson's heir, which I think, again,
that's cool.
Is lovely, isn't it? That I just think that is so lovely. I've realised that I've only got one sheet of notes and I should have 2. So talk amongst yourselves while I try and find it, will you, please?
Okay.
You said Alice, it's kind of, you know, oh, well done for her managing to marry someone 20 years younger. Descriptions from his stepdaughter, so that's the daughter of the woman he married, basically described how ugly he was when she first met him. because by that point you already had sort of a lot of scars and.
I was going to say a lot of scrofula.
Yeah. And also, this could be a good point to note for anyone who's confused about a Tory being lefty.
Yeah,
that this is the historical Tory party where you sort of had Tories and Whigs, which was WHIGS, and they were kind of flipped politically as, in a very simplistic way, flipped politically to the current equivalents, which would be the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats.
Yes, and then slightly more left than that is Labour, and slightly more left than that is parties that I've considered voting for.
Mm.
And then it's communism, which is really the only real option.
But I was reading about what he stood for, and the fact that when I read about him like moving the ex-slave into his house, and he lived with him for 30 years, I think it gives you a measure of, I said earlier in my notes that his friends used to say he was very kind and, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like generous, with his time and things. And I think that just goes to show you the measure of the man, doesn't it, really? I really was warming to him a little bit. And like Daisy said, there was a bit of me that was like, it's almost like I was quite surprised because of the age where he was living. You kind of, there was as you're digging around, you're thinking, I hope he's not a bastard. I hope he's not a bastard. And then when they're not, you're like,
he's going to be a Nazi like the rest of them.
I mean, we talk a lot about Nazis, don't we, on this show?
I'm sorry, I feel like you hold me responsible for that.
It's not your fault, Daisy. It's history.
Yeah,
history's fault.
Yeah. So many people were Nazis.
It's just a black spot, isn't it, really?
Can't swing a cat around history for fucking Nazis.
No, exactly. I was surprisingly surprised about it. I was like, oh, he's nice. That's nice, isn't it? That makes a nice change. So let's go back. I found my notes, by the way. They were down the side of the in my filing system that's on the floor. So that'll explain that. So yeah, he married Elizabeth Porter. Elizabeth died despite the bereavement in 1750s. The 1750s was Johnson's most successful decades. After 9 years of work, the dictionary was published on April the 15th, 1755. It was not the first such dictionary, but it was undoubtedly the most important at the time. He completed his famous dictionary with 42,773 entries. It became defined, and it defined the language at the time.
I'm a really big fan of how frequently in the records and stuff they're talking about the English dictionary like as if it's a novel. I just really like to imagine if the dictionary was just a novel. It somehow managed to tell a story throughout.
I know.
How an aardvark started on a journey and got all the way to the zoo.
Yeah. That's basically what the dictionary is, isn't it?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly what the dictionary is. The aardvark who managed to find his way to the zoo.
I mean, there is a children's book in there somewhere, isn't there? I don't know what I'm talking about.
Just standard practice for the lABLEd podcast, I think.
Yeah, just me waffling. His inventions were to include words that ordinary people use together, with 100,000 quotations showing their usage. 5 further editions were published in Johnson's lifetime, and 6 came out when he died. Johnson was by now the leader of the London literal. What's that word, Alice?
Literary.
Thank you. World, with a friend and noble artist, and writers such as Joshua Reynolds, Edmund Burke, Oliver Goldsmith, and David Garrick. Another vital friendship was for Johnson was Henry Thrale, a wealthy brewer I mean, everybody should make friends with a brewer. And Member of Parliament, and his wife, Hester. Johnson became part of their family, treating their London houses as second homes. Soon after the dictionary was published, he met James Boswell, a young Scotsman who wrote the famous biography, A Life of Johnson, published in 1791. To spread Johnson's name, in 1773, Johnson and Boswell set out on a 3-month tour of the Scottish Highlands and Hebrides. Both wrote accounts of their travels. Johnson spent a considerable amount of time in Edinburgh, and in the 1770s, with Boswell, the man who, thanks to him, became known as Dr. Johnson. It was...
So was he not actually a doctor?
No.
Like, he didn't have a PhD?
Daisy?
No, not as far as I can tell. He's not a medical doctor either, but a lot of people sort of started thinking of him as a medical doctor because he was very interested in it, and he did sort of collect a lot of knowledge and just sort of going about. But yeah, you could just call yourself a doctor if you wanted.
I listened to a medical history podcast. Can I start calling myself a doctor?
Yes, although if I actually get sick, I'm not going to come to you and go, "What's wrong with this, Alice? Can you diagnose this, please?"
I can tell you things that people used to use to treat, like, whatever's ailing you in the olden days that didn't work.
I don't know what that is, Luce, but stick a leech on it, it'll be fine.
Oh no, I was going to say my big takeaway from medical history is strap a chicken to yourself until it dies,
right?
And then you'll be fine.
That's quite annoying, isn't it?
I mean, especially for the chicken.
Put your trousers on, yeah.
Daisy, did you just say very difficult putting trousers on?
Yeah, if you've got a chicken strapped to your leg. Particularly if it's flapping around.
You might just get comatose and used to you after a while.
I mean, it sounds like, regardless of whatever was wrong with you to start with, you'll pretty soon have a leg that's scratched up to buggery and possibly like bird flu.
Oh yeah, like your illness will no longer be your top problem.
No, you'll be pecked to death by a chicken.
It's like how, like, you know, if you've got a pain in your back and you punch yourself in the face.
That classic cure.
Yeah.
Back doesn't hurt anymore. Who's the real winner here?
Oh, I think delirious is setting. Where do we get to? So he became a doctor. So basically, can I start calling myself Lucy Wood OBE? Can I do that, or what?
You probably could.
I mean, you can call yourself whatever you want, Luce. We have
established
that whatever we say on this podcast doesn't really matter anyway.
No, of course it doesn't.
Well, imagine, I suppose, could you legally, like, change your name by deed poll so that your surname was Wood space OBE?
Wood.obe. Maybe. I don't know. I'm gonna. That's what I'm doing this afternoon. Googling that.
Okay.
It was from the record. So he got the doctorate because it was from the record of a brilliant conversation that's so many memorable quotations. So basically, he was saying he was quoting all these people and saying, "I've put them in a book." Basically, I think that's why he became a doctor.
So it's not even like an honorary degree.
No, you know, like when you get like Lenny Henry's, like, isn't he like the Chancellor of Birmingham City University, and before that he was given a doctorate. And
yeah, but that's Birmingham City University will have decided to do that as a recognition of his like contributions to the arts. I feel a little bit like this is like me deciding that I'm going to get to be Chancellor of Birmingham City University because of my contributions to the arts.
I think we should call ourselves like doctors for our contribution to podcasting.
I mean, I got halfway through a PhD.
Yeah, you see, you got
I'm
further
at
than
least
I did.
duh.
Yeah, exactly. Duh. Johnson was continually short of money, and despite his success with his dictionary in 1762, his financial situation was alleviated when he was awarded a government pension.
I legit thought you were going to say his financial situation was alleviated when he died.
Yeah, so did it. Well, yeah,
would alleviate it.
I was going to say, because that'll do it.
Yeah, not spending any more money now.
I have just had a quick look at honorary doctorates.
Yes,
and apparently they were much more common in this era than they were before. So, like, if a royal visited Oxford, then they would give like every person who was travelling with them an honorary document, because essentially, university can give out a degree to whoever the hell it wants. It's only like, you know, oh, you have to do the course. Well, only because they say so. They can give it out whenever they want.
Well, you see, if I'd have had that attitude when I went to university, Daisy, I would have had a much better time.
Could have saved myself some time.
Just give me the sodding. Just
give me the sodding history.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So throughout his life, particularly towards the end, he suffered periods of depression. As Leonard Davis writes, if Johnson had lived during the 20th century, he most probably would have been institutionalized, given shock therapy, or more recently, put on a regime of antidepressants. I mean, to say he would be put on antidepressants, probably true. Yes, I'd go with that.
I mean, only if he chose to visit his GP and say, you know, not doing so great. I don't think people just look at you in the street and go, you need to be on antidepressants.
No, that's true. That's very true. The bloke who made the sweeping statement about him being put on shock therapy and all that kind of stuff has also said that he was surprised that his contemporaries wrote about him as a brilliant man who had some oddities rather than a seriously disabled person. Which, if somebody was writing about me like that, right, after I don't know whether this man is alive now or whether, you know, it was a retrospective or whether he knew Johnson, but I would find that...
I assume as he was talking about if Johnson was alive in the 20th century, he was looking retrospectively back at Johnson.
But I do find that that generalisation of, I'm surprised people called him a brilliant man and not a disabled person. That is, to me, is extremely offensive.
Yeah. Really.
Because it's like, yeah, well, he wrote the dictionary and he did all this and he became a doctor and all that. But forget all that because he was disabled.
Yeah, you can only be one or the other.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Or disabled.
Yeah. But do you think, Daisy, that's a reflection of like perhaps a change in attitudes towards disability though? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, you can see from the records that in Johnson's time, it was kind of, you know, yes, it stopped him doing some things that he wanted to do. Like, you know, he didn't get a job as a schoolmaster because, you know, he thought that it would worry or distract
the boys
learning. Yeah.
Oh.
Because of the ways Tourette's presented.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, even while he had that sort of setback, for the most part, it was kind of all right. It was like, okay, well, I can't do this, so I'll go and do something else instead. And it just sort of, like you say, Lucy, no one really knew about it because it wasn't really mentioned, because it wasn't particularly abnormal that somebody would, you know, have kind of chronic ailments or things like that. It's only, you know, more recently when you start, you know, well, when you've had those periods of time where people have been institutionalized, as this person says, and it's become a more kind of bad thing. It's kind of like around time it became sort of medicalized.
Yeah,
sort of like, you know, oh, we have to fix this, and if we haven't fixed you, then, you know,
then we've failed as doctors. Whereas
and there's nothing that can be done for you. So, oh well.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds to me, from what I've read there, that Johnson had a very happy life for the majority of it. You know, other than the period of depression towards the end where he may have struggled a little bit. I think, you know, he managed to find a wife and had a very good life, despite the fact that, you know, it
doesn't sound like he even had a lot of particular like a chronically poor health.
No.
Like, it sounds like generally he was quite well.
Not until his later years.
Yeah.
Which
You
isn't that true for all of us?
Well,
It's the aging
in
process.
in my case, no. I'm getting it all now.
Yeah, sorry to rub that in, Daisy. But there are mornings where I wake up and feel like I am 94 instead of 34, and you're like, you know. But it doesn't mean to say that I am miserable and sad with my lot. Do you know what I mean? I've got a great life. We all have, I think. But when you said to me that the reason why, when you've just said there that the reason why you didn't continue or pursue a career as a teacher was because he didn't want to like frighten or concern his potential students, that makes me feel really sad. I mean, there may be other reasons as well, but if one of those reasons is I don't want to scare other people.
Yeah, see, I feel like it was more their decision than his.
I was going to say, I can't. I feel like that was probably people said to him, "Oh no, you
scare everybody."
Yeah.
But although from what I've seen, he did teach in some places. It was just this particular thing that, you know, he wanted to be the school master.
Mm.
So he did set up his own school at some point, although it failed relatively quickly.
Yeah, I think that was in Lichfield actually, but I can't remember what it was called or things like that. I don't know whether did you manage to find anything, Daisy?
Not that I saw, no. But in fairness, I didn't specifically look for that.
No. Again,
I saw a thing that said, "Oh, we set up a school and it failed." And I went, "Oh, that's nice." And they just kind of carried on with their life.
Yeah. What was the name of it, please? What was the Ofsted report?
Yeah, in hindsight, yeah, that is kind of my job to look at that. But I didn't. Sorry.
No, it's okay. There's at least one episode where
I'm sorry, listeners, I've let you down.
There's at least one episode where Daisy goes, "I don't know."
Yeah.
I don't know.
Normally I try and hide it better, but I'm too tired.
Yeah, but I think he's just I really quite like him. And the museum were actually really pleased that we were doing this episode, focusing on his disability in the first instance, because like Daisy said, nobody really these days talks about it. They'll say Samuel Johnson, oh yeah, he invented the dictionary, but not really of anything about his impairments. I mean, I only knew of his impairments when I was sat in Wetherspoons and there was something written about it on the wall, and I went, oh, why is he dragging himself through the streets? But it turned out that it was wrong. So basically, listeners, what I'm telling you is don't
believe stuff that's written on the wall in the pub.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean,
that's a real shocking life lesson to have learned there at 34, Luce.
Yeah.
I've found the quote about the going for the master's position that he didn't get.
Okay.
Said he was rejected because he has the character of being a very haughty, ill-natured gent, and yet he has such a way of distorting his face, which, though he can't help, think it may affect some young lads.
So basically, you're pulling funny faces.
But you're also really stuck up.
And you're really stuck up.
Yeah, it's almost like, so further on, it seems that it's not that it would scare the kids, but more that they wouldn't take him seriously as a teacher.
Yes, yeah, I suppose. It's a bit like when you get a supply teacher in and they're a bit wishy-washy. And
I was just going to say that. I can believe that was snotty teenagers, even in the 1700s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because teenagers are teenagers through and through, aren't they, really? Yeah.
But it does also say here that the school that he set up, I mean, it still doesn't have a name, but he set it up with David Garrick, the actor.
Yeah. Yes. Who Lucy mentioned just now.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was probably reading this at the time you were saying that. Sorry.
Daisy's reading her notes as we're doing the podcast.
I knew it was in here somewhere. It's apparently I got halfway through with the green highlighter and then just went, yeah, that's enough. I just didn't highlight this bit.
That's enough for today.
I really love your commitment to this show, Daisy. It really means a lot to us.
I had to go into a pile of crap to get that green highlighter out. How dare you?
Did your highlighter run out because it's been in a pile of crap, or did you just put it down and just go, yeah, that's enough?
No, it's the standard highlighter I use is a yellow one, but it's running out, and so I had to go and find a different one, which is in a pile of crap because I'm moving soon.
We when we meet up and we have our first proper face-to-face team meeting, I'm going to buy you a pack of highlighters that are for labelled use only.
Thank you.
Podcast use only.
Write it off as an expense.
Yeah. So, Daisy, is there anything else that you found that I've not touched on, or maybe like anything that you found in the documents that I sent you, because that I couldn't make head nor tail of?
Yeah, so one of the things you sent me was a picture of a little bottle. It was called a squill bottle.
Mm.
So it was saying in there that a lot of people thought for a while that it was a bottle that contained smelling salts.
Right.
And it's, you know, like in the films when, you know, a woman swoons and they give her some, smelling salts, and then she, you know, wakes up.
Yeah.
But they said there that they didn't think it was smelling salts because, you know, he didn't really have any like documented like fainting spells or anything like that. So I think it's actually squill, which is a plant that was sort of mixed with a bit of vinegar,
right,
and used for for a couple of different things. So primarily for like heart problems.
Yeah,
it's like, you know, sort of congestive heart failure, too fast heartbeat, that sort of thing.
Vinegar will sort that right out.
Yeah. And for what they call dropsy.
I've heard of dropsy.
Yeah, so dropsy is edema, so water retention.
Yeah,
which is often a symptom of heart problems.
Right.
Yes. So he had a lot of swelling. This is again one of these things that came on particularly towards the end of his life. He had a lot of swellings from water retention, and on a few occasions he had people try to drain it because it was so uncomfortable. And so edema is like water retention between sort of different layers of like muscle and skin and things. You know, it's quite far down. It's not
it's not like on the surface where you could just
it's not like a blister.
Whoa.
So he had this squill stuff for a while, which was one of these. I mean, if you try and look it up now, it's basically a sea of black and red writing that says no, don't take this. It's so dangerous.
So what was in this squill? Was it vinegar and
so squill is a plant,
right?
And it seemed to be quite good at relieving his water retention to the point where he was using it for a while and sort of dosing it out of this little flask, so like absolutely no measurement whatsoever.
No.
So the source is kind of like, you know, oh yes, he was able to measure his own like his own dosage between 0.9 milliliters and 3.5 milliliters. I'm like, right, I would say that he can't measure his own doses then, can he?
No, he can't.
That's not very consistent.
He's just knocking it back.
Like,
yeah. It's the point where we learn that squill is like deadly nightshade or something like that.
It's not quite, but
is it getting for that? Like sort of.
The reason it was working is because it was slowly atrophying his muscle.
Yeah.
So I mean, he had good effect from it, but not for all that long.
No.
So he used it for months, and his sort of swelling and water retention kind of completely went away for at least sort of 3 months, and then it came back.
But I suppose when it came back with vigor as well, because it was like, now I've got you.
It's one of these things that, like a lot of, you know, old herbal remedies, you know, people started, you know, doing science to it and tested the bits that worked and then developed them into things that didn't have as many, you know,
terrible side effects.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So there are medicines that we still use today that are derived from parts of the squill plant that we've recognized help.
Yeah.
He was also one of the first people to use something called digitalis,
Right.
which is a particular preparation of the foxglove plant,
Right. Yeah.
which again is still used for things like, edema and water retention and things like that. But he did have the water retention, on and on for the rest of his life, really. And he would be, begging his doctors to try and, lance it and relieve the discomfort, which arguably, unsurprisingly, the doctors weren't hugely keen on that. And
No.
so,
but I suppose if you're that uncomfortable, you will try anything. I mean,
and he did.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Give me it, whatever it is. Give it me. Because I've had relatives who have had water retention, and to some extent, my during the lockdown period, because I've not been pushing myself and moving about, because I don't walk on my feet. If I don't move, my legs and feet get very swollen, so much so that I've had very difficulty putting my shoes on and things like that. So I know, and that's only very, very mild as well, so I can't imagine how uncomfortable that, having like proper water retention, where because it's just you can't move, really. It's awful.
Yeah. So like in the last sort of day of his life, the last sort of days and things, obviously it's very, very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so he did take matters into his own hand, particularly pertaining what he thought was retention, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
In his testicle.
Good morning, everybody.
So he did stab himself in the testicle.
Oh.
Is it possible to get water retention of the testicle? I feel as though
I'm not sure.
Any doctors out there?
I wouldn't Google it. Are you Googling it, Daisy?
Of course I am.
So yeah, I don't think I could.
It seems like if it's because I always thought water retention was about the
legs.
Yeah, and
you can in the scrotum.
Oh Lord! Oh.
You feel like that, Liz. You don't even have a scrotum.
I know. I know
how listeners out there with scrotums feel
about
this whole conversation.
Sorry.
But he did feel relieved.
Yes.
By his actions of stabbing himself in the testicle. Then he died a few hours later.
I don't think I actually covered his death, did I? So he died on December the 13th, 1784.
With a puncture wound in the testicle.
I was going to say, from blood loss via testicle.
It kind of ruins the memoriam that I'm giving him as we are talking about his death. But Samuel Johnson died as a result of a stroke after a period of illness and depression. It widely acclaimed as a critic, as well as a lexicographer, that's the one, and was buried in Westminster Abbey. So there we go. But yeah, it does kind of take away the fact, kind of takes away the somberness of it when you know that he, just before he died, he stabbed himself in the balls. Doesn't it, really?
This is your own fault for asking me.
Yeah, it is.
This is history.
I should have remembered to tell you when he died, because we didn't cover that, did we? But yeah, it's I don't know. I just find it genuinely fascinating that to think as well that not many people know that like we've said before, he was disabled, and yet he compiled the first dictionary which everybody uses. You know what I mean? That's taking one for that's like building up the reputation of disabled people, how good we are at things, isn't it? Really, I'm like, well done, congratulations. I know you're not a Paralympian, but you did write the dictionary, so thank you very much for that.
I wonder if, like, and I go back and forth on my feelings about when people say this, but from my understanding, often Tourette's can have an impact on a person's ability to kind of verbalize their thoughts. And I wonder if, you know, part of his interest in words and writing came from the fact that he had difficulty expressing himself verbally. Like,
Yes,
I can see that.
And also, do you know, it always makes me wonder whether people who have, I mean, I don't know, I'm just going by what I always think when I see people who've got communication difficulties, that sometimes if you struggle to speak and you're trying to get the words out to speak, whether you like get halfway through your point and just think, oh, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Because you've
got to really want to say it.
Because otherwise you just think, oh, it's a waste of energy because it's absolutely exhausting to try and get these words out. Unless I really need you to know this, can I really be asked?
I suppose it would partly explain why Rosie Jones has got such, like, everything's such comedy gold, because it's just, you know.
I love that woman. Rosie, if you're listening to this, not that you are, but if you are listening to this, by some miracle, would you please come on our podcast? Because then we can stop being podcasters, because we'll have reached the goal of, that's we've done it. We've got podcast, we've completed it, mate. But yeah, I love her. No, but it does make me wonder whether, like, I mean, I suppose if you've got speech difficulties, you must have a workaround of, I don't know, saving spoons. But so the thing about the Tourette's, it does make me wonder whether, because, and you know, sometimes depending on the severity of the Tourette's, it might not be a challenge for the actual person speaking, but to the person they're talking to, it looks like it's an effort. Do you know what I mean? So it's always made me wonder whether they just think, oh, can't be arsed with this. It's all right. You crack on, it's okay. And I think he's a kind man.
Well, yeah, sure, that too.
I think he is a kind man. So anybody who's kind gets at least into the back garden, if not into the house. So there we go. So there we go. That's Samuel Johnson.
That was interesting, Luce and Daisy. Thank you very much.
I know it's very early. We won't do this again this early.
Unless it goes really well.
Unless it goes really well.
In which case we'll only do it like this.
Yeah. I don't care whether you're tired. It's working really well. So there we go.
Well, if you guys thought we did a particularly good job this time, you can leave us a review. You can review every single episode individually on Apple Podcasts, and that's a really good way of showing your support for the show, because the more people who leave us excellent 5-star reviews, the more we get, like, bumped up the you might also like this chain for new listeners. So go do that. And
there's the crowdfunder as well.
Yep, that.
Yeah.
Which you can access on our website, and that we share on social media. Join our Facebook community, particularly where we are, like, talking about history lessons, and you can tell us what you want to hear as, like, future lessons. And I think that's everything.
Yeah, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter also.
Yes. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you going to say goodbye, Daisy, or are you?
Oh, yeah, sure. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the lABLEd podcast. If you like the show, please rate, review and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at lABLEd podcast.
Thanks go to our editor Adam Hall, our music composer Maisie Crunden, and our graphic designer Sarah Coley.
We'll see you next time.